have to agree with a little bit what Ken is saying in terms of the till buildings. How many of you guys know what till is? Okay. It's the tenant interim lease program. This is the way it works. Where it used to work, right? When they were giving them out like hotcakes. Um, landlords got to a point they want to collect insurance. Mike again. They want to collect insurance. They left.
You put it down, when you hold it, you have a problem.
Want me to hold it? Oh, okay. So it's me. All right. So they allowed these buildings to become completely dilapidated, like our grassroots building. HPD came in. Correct me if I'm wrong, Seth. HPD came in, fixed it all up. Tenants, you guys can manage the building. You'll own it. You'll each get the apartment for $250, $350, usually per room. What has happened historically, I mean, first of all, a lot of these buildings were going into till. And these were not, small apartments. These were like 5, 6, 7 bedroom apartments. And what has happened, I think, in my opinion, as a tenant advocate, is that it's not just that there's not enough training, but also it also falls on the side of the board. They also want to need to get training. I'm going to go add it one more, which is that not-for-profit organizations in the community need to do more too. Because I don't know how many of you guys know, but my organization is volunteer driven. I'm doing this without salary. So there should be more organizations like me. There should be more tenant leaders in till programs like me saying, you know what, let's figure this out. Because right now what you have is you have all these other landlords who work with HPD. I'm sorry, I'm gonna put the cat out of the bag here. They work with HPD and they enroll into the TPT program. That's called the third party transfer program. And then what happens is that I call it HPD's Christmas, all these landlords just sit around, wait for these till buildings to fail. And they fail because they fail to pay their taxes. They fail because they do not know how to provide the basic services. There are reasons. It is up to the tenant. In addition to that is education, as to what Robert Jackson said. If you educate the community, if you educate the residents, saying, you know what, here's how you could probably make it better. And then on top of that, of course, you have to let go of your ego, because a lot of the issues is that these boards, they think that this is their building. So not-for-profits like myself need to work with the till buildings. There are apparently 1,200 of them left. I do not know how many we started with, but that's very little, at least in our community here that I'm aware of. So yes, it is, I think it goes both sides. And I did and said, thank you so much. I know you guys waited like forever, right? But Seth, what can you, in your opinion, what can you tell us about HPD's position on housing preservation? We talked about, these new developments that Ken Haran and some other folks, including NLM, are producing. What is HPD stand in terms of preserving these beautiful buildings that we have here in Harlem, Northern Manhattan?
That's a great question. Obviously, there's two sides to the coin. There's development of new housing stock, which we clearly need. As many have pointed out, we had a large in-migration, and anytime that happens, obviously you need to be building new housing stock for those new people that are coming in. At the same time, if you are losing apartments, if you're losing affordable apartments, then you're just treading water, or maybe you're even sinking. So, that's why we are housing preservation and development, not just housing development. In the last 3 years, HPD has launched 2 major new initiatives. The first initiative is called the Alternative Enforcement Program. I'm not sure how many of you know about it, but the Alternative Enforcement Program was an effort to identify and address some of the worst buildings in the city. There are a number of buildings out there, whether through unfortunate circumstances, or unfortunately in some cases because of landlords that are bad actors, where where buildings, some smaller buildings, 10, 12 units, but some relatively large buildings were just completely falling apart. And the Alternative Enforcement Program takes 200 of these buildings every year, steps in, does roof to cellar inspections, finds out all of the problems that are in the building, and then goes to the landlord. The landlord gets 90 days to correct 80% of the B and C violations in the buildings. Our violations at HPD range from A, the least serious, you need some paint or something like that, to a C violation, which is a real threat to the safety, to the health and the safety of the tenants. Something like a lack of heat, a lack of hot water, a flowing water leak, not just a water stain or something, but a flowing leak that can actually weaken the structure of your building, might cause your ceiling to collapse or something like that. B is somewhere in between. So if in the first 90 days the landlord corrects 80% of those B and C violations, then it comes out of the program. Obviously, we're going to keep a watch on that building, and we're going to look to see that that landlord is making progress to correct the rest of the violations. But at that point, we feel that the landlord has made a good faith effort to really bring the building back up to a reasonable level of compliance with the code. The landlord doesn't comply in this fashion. Sometimes that's because the landlord is completely absent. Sometimes it's because the landlord really honestly can't afford to. Other times it's because the landlord is just not cooperating. Then the city will step in. There's a number of fees and fines associated with this, but the city will step in and make repairs to the building, whereas normally HPD has authority to if there's a leak in the roof, but we really know that the roof needs to be replaced, right? It's 20 years old or something, it really needs to be replaced. Normally we don't have authority to do that. We have authority to come in and patch the leak if the landlord's not doing so. If the boiler's breaking down or there's lack of hot water because there's a leak in the pipe, we can come in and patch the leak. With AEP, we can come in, we can replace the roof, we can replace the whole boiler system, the whole piping system. These are significant costs. Then we slap a 25% surcharge on top of that. We slap taxes on top of that. There's some penalties for late payment on top of that. And then the landlord gets, in their quarterly tax bill, the landlord gets the bill for that. If it's not paid, a lien goes on the property, and the property may eventually be taken for failure to pay those taxes and those liens. In that fashion, we can, using a device that Alcia mentioned, third-party transfer, we can transfer ownership of the property to a responsible landlord that oftentimes a nonprofit landlord, sometimes a for-profit landlord, but management groups that we have worked with very successfully over a course of many years and that we know are going to manage the property responsibly so that the tenants in that building get a renovated, fixed-up building, and they get a management group that's actually going to maintain the property the way that the property should be maintained. Now, that was a program that we launched maybe three and a half years ago or something of that nature. The next step was something that we launched about 6 months ago, which is called the Proactive Preservation Initiative. And Proactive Preservation Initiative is really the kind of the natural outgrowth of AEP. And in some cases, it's it's kind of a precursor to it because it's a step that comes first. We know that there are these bad buildings out there that go into AEP, and generally they're buildings that we know about. We're getting a lot of complaints. When a building gets that bad, everybody's calling. Tenant, community groups like Palante organize the tenants, and there's a lot of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and there's a lot of squeaking going on, and so they get the grease. But there are also a lot of buildings out there that aren't that bad, but they could get that way. They're the landlord. Maybe it's a family that's bought a 8-unit building or a 10-unit building. They've worked all their lives. They've managed to put together some money to buy this building, and they're not. This is for retirement. This is to help put grandkids through college or whatever. But something happens. They get somebody gets injured on the job. Somebody loses a job, whatever. And the boiler breaks down, and they have to make a payment into the building that they didn't anticipate, and they don't have deep pockets like some of the larger management companies, and that can be the tipping point that tips a building towards eventually sliding into an AEP situation when your money coming in is just what's going out, and next time something else breaks, you know, put it together with bubble gum and twine, you don't really repair it properly. And so the PPI program is a way to reach out to our elected officials who are here this evening, to community groups like Palante, to the community boards, and say, look, you know, at HPD, we are largely a reactive organization. When you call us with a complaint and you say I don't have hot water, or you know there's broken, the sink in my bathroom is broken or whatever, we're going to send out an inspector. We'll write a violation if that's the case, and you know the landlord hopefully will make that repair. We don't have the manpower to go around and inspect every building every year, so a building could be falling into disrepair, and if for whatever reason the tenants aren't calling, they're not calling because they don't know that they can call. They're not calling maybe because they're scared because of immigration, you know, issues, you know, whatever the reason is. This building could have a lot of potentially have a lot of violations on it, have a lot of conditions that would warrant a violation, but HPD doesn't know about it. And so what PPI is doing is trying to catch these buildings early on before it gets to a condition where the living conditions in these buildings are really, you know, horrible, and where you're in a condition where you as the tenant are saying, I've got to get out of here, this is terrible, but then you're giving up your rent stabilized unit. So, you know, we have a relatively new commissioner at HPD. His name is Matthew Wambua. He's great, relatively young, very passionate about housing and about affordable housing. And he has really made it his mission to focus on preservation. Because again, it doesn't help us to build a unit if for every unit we build, we lose one or we lose two units in some cases. We have to preserve this housing. And just to take a step back and give you a little bit of context, you know, over the last 3 decades, HPD has invested literally billions of dollars in developing 350,000 units of affordable housing, you know, throughout the 5 boroughs. And as we're analyzing the work that we've done and the housing conditions throughout the city, one thing that we're really finding is that it's in those neighborhoods where we've invested the most amount of money, those are the neighborhoods that are most hard hit by this economic downturn. And if you, Councilmember Jackson, I believe it was, that was talking about the red dots, and if you look at the red dots of where foreclosure are, I have a map that's sitting here in front of me that has to do with PPI. It's kind of small, so I won't even bother to hold it up. But he was talking about, you know, central Brooklyn just being a sea of red dots, and you know, certain neighborhoods being just completely red, and you can't even see the dots. If I showed you this map, you would see it matches it exactly. The areas where we put in all of these billions of dollars are exactly those neighborhoods where we're seeing really you know, some of these buildings slip back into bad conditions, and we don't want to see that the neighborhood overall slips back into those conditions. I mean, that would be a waste of the government's funds. So we are very committed to preservation. It's our main focus at the moment, which isn't to say that we're developing. Over the last 6 years or so, we've developed over 9,000 units of new affordable housing just here in central Harlem. But our main focus really is in preservation. But it requires that we all work together. I mean, again, we can't do it without groups like Palante, without your elected officials, without your community boards. So, you know, and without you as tenants. If you have a condition in your building that you don't think is correct, you know, if there's rats, if there's roaches, if there's, you know, if your super came and patched the wall and didn't paint over it, if there's something's leaking, you know, whatever it is, you're not getting heat, you're not getting hot water, you need to call 311 and let us know so we can send the inspectors out and we can, you know, take care of these problems. And if it's gone a step beyond that and you're really seeing some serious problems, if you're worried about the direction your building is going in, please contact your community boards, your elected officials, your local nonprofits, and let them know so that they can work with us through programs like PPI and
I'm also just going to add a little bit onto what you said too. The money that HPD is putting into preservation is letting us as developers come into a building and extend the affordability. A lot of these buildings are coming out of tax credit compliance which means the developer could turn that building into market rate housing if they so choose. But because of the funding that they're helping us put together, we're able to come in and do a moderate rehab of these buildings, or even sometimes a full-out rehab, and then extend the affordability for another 30 years. Each time that they're partnering us with a project, we're extending the affordability. You know, we come into buildings sometimes and people think, oh, you're going to just fix this up and we're going to get kicked out. And generally the way we work with them is an extended affordability. So just always know that with, you know, generally when it's HPD and us working together, or, you know, a developer working with HPD, it's to extend the affordability. So I mean, it's an amazing program and they've really put a lot of dollars into it. Right now we're doing 500 units in Harlem of preservation work. Units that are coming out of tax credit compliance. We're coming in doing rehabs of those units and extending the affordability so it keeps that way. And the other plug I just wanted to say too, for that I think somebody had asked Ken about, was how do you find out about these units? These lotteries are posted on HPD's website, and we would love to get as many applications as possible. You know, a lot of them go quickly, I know, and it's, you know, but that's where we try to advertise. We do the newspapers everywhere, but the lottery is the best way to get applications for those units.
Yeah, and you don't have to just, I mean, it's on our website, and that's probably the easiest way to go, because you can quickly search, you know, by, not necessarily by neighborhood, but you can search by borough, and you know, it's going to tell you what the neighborhoods are, it's going to tell you what the income requirements are, it's going to tell you the size of the units, so on and so forth. But you can also get that information in a number of different ways. You can call 311. They'll connect you to a hotline, which will give you a recording of all of the lotteries that are open at the moment. And those lotteries aren't just for rental. They're for home ownership, you know, the type of units that Ken was talking about. You know, they're all over the place. There's some in towers. There's some, you know, out, for instance, out in the far Rockaways that are, you know, kind of more like individual units. And you know, another way that you can find out about it is obviously you could go and talk to, you could go into like Rob Jackson's office, or you know, you can talk to, I'm sure, you know, if you talk to Alcia, she would be able to help you to find out about these lotteries. There's no fee to get involved in the lottery. You can sign up for as many lotteries as you want. You just can't sign up for the same lottery over and over and over again, only one time per lottery, but you can sign up for as many lotteries as you want, and there is no fee. So if anybody ever tries, occasionally they do this. Occasionally you'll see an ad in the newspaper and it's a scam. If anybody's asking you for $50 or $100 or something to get into a lottery, that's straight up scam. Don't get involved in that.
Quick question: what's the best place to look for future developments that are not that already don't have the lotteries? They're going to have it possibly in the future, so I could just get a heads up.
If you want, you can go to our website, www.nyc.gov/HPD, and we have an email. You know, you can sign up to get an email from us, get in all of our press releases,